Well, tonight I thought I would interrupt my regularly scheduled story review videos to make this video, which is called Why the USA is Like France in 1940 and Why It's a Paper Tiger compared to the true superpower, which is China. As much as I lament it, and I hate to say it, I really do, I hate it, but China is the world superpower, and the United States at best is now just a regional power. We are not the same strength that we were 10 years ago. Hell, we're not even the same strength we were 2 years ago. And let me give you some facts and figures, because I'm a fact and figure type of guy. You ought to know that if you've stuck with me by now. You know that I'm deep into research, and I have the actual boots on the ground experience to back up what I put in my scenarios, which I war game these things out for your benefit. Because if you understand and you have an analytical brain, then you can look at the work and you can understand the purpose behind it and see that it's there to help you to survive in what's coming. We will be invaded. It's a guarantee. It's only a matter of time. But let me explain you something here. I'm going to give you some facts and figures to mill over. Let's talk about steel production. Annual steel production of China is 1,064 million metric tons a year, which equals actually 1,640,000 in metric tons per year, which is 11 times what the USA produces a year. The USA only produces 72.7 million metric tons. China was 1,640,000 metric tons, or 1,064 million metric tons, the same thing. Russia, who has half our population roughly, produces basically what we do, which is 71.6 million metric tons. Now, for a nation with half our population, that's phenomenal to be able to produce that much steel annually. So when you add that to China, that's like 12 times the steel we produce, because China alone produces 11 times, and Russia and China are thick as thieves. They're best buds, you know. They're tight. So let's talk a little bit more about these figures. When it comes to war production, Norinco, one of the Chinese CCP regime's key arms manufacturing corporations, which belongs to the state, has 157 medium to large armaments factories and 1,200 shipyards, which don't belong necessarily to Norinco, but they produce naval ships. Now, by contrast and comparison here, the United States has one tank factory and a dozen other arms plants and 4 naval shipyards that it primarily contracts its arms production requirements to. So, okay, so you have just over a dozen arms production plants for the United States, and China has 157 huge factories that produce arms and 1,200 shipyards to our 4. We have 4. They have 1,200 shipyards. And according to their civil-military fusion policy, those all can quickly be converted to producing military ships, and they already have the biggest, most modern navy in the world. That's uncontested. No one can contest that. It's a fact. And I'm going to go over that in a second. But first, we depend on China for a lot of electronic components, and many of which, some of these chips go into our military equipment. And we also depend on Chinese pharmaceuticals and pharmaceutical components, Chinese chemicals. We depend on other Chinese goods too. And they can cut us off at any time. And in fact, according to some, they already are. They've basically cut us off in terms of trade. We are at their mercy. It's not the other way around. We are at China's mercy because we're too dependent on them. We don't produce anything anymore. This petrodollar scheme is the only thing keeping our economy and our way of life even a fraction of being afloat, you know, to where it at least keeps up appearances. But once that petrodollar's gone, guess what? Your way of life collapses overnight, because that's literally the only thing holding it up at this point. Okay, now, let's talk about defense budgets. The United States spends $768 billion annually on defense, and that's not counting extra monies awarded to, through Congress, that they give extra monies to the armed forces. That's just the regular annual defense budget, and most of that gets wasted. But the Chinese defense budget is $229.47 billion, which at first glance is only about a third of what we spend. But when you look at the purchasing power parity of China, they get a lot more for their money. That becomes really like 3 times what it says on the ledger. Yeah, sure, it says $229.47 billion on the ledger, but really when you adjust it to purchasing power parity of the Chinese, of their economy and their what their money gets them, that's what purchasing power parity means. Is what their money can actually get in their economy. That $229.47 billion translates to like 3 times that much. So they're basically spending what we spend when it's adjusted to purchasing power parity, because we get less for our money. Russia spends about $80 billion, but they're very brilliant with how they spend their money. $80 billion is nothing close to what China or the U.S. spends, but they still get a lot for their money too, because they don't waste a dime of it like we do. And yeah, we're overly dependent on China for everything. So all that aside, they have all these factories. They produce 11 times the steel we produce. They have way more shipyards. I mean, they dwarf us in shipyards and in armaments factories. We only have like a dozen armaments factories and 4 shipyards. They got 1,200 shipyards, and they have 157 armaments factories. That's crazy. That's just China. I'm not even talking about Russia here mainly. This is mainly about China. The Chinese Navy has 355 modern vessels and 200 auxiliary ships, and their paramilitary marine militia, which is, I guess, sort of like their Coast Guard, their home defense force, has over 100 ships. There's not an exact number, but those are like coastal littoral patrol ships, and even some fishing ships converted for military or paramilitary usage. Russia has over 290 ships, but China has 355 plus 200. So China has 555 total naval vessels, and they're all very modern, and we have only 490. So China outnumbers us in Navy. They outnumber us by about 65. I'm sorry. No, 75. They outnumber us by 75 ships. And that's including our reserve fleet in that 490 figure. So now we go to land forces, and I have, for Russia, they have 12,500 main battle tanks, 30,000 APCs and IFVs, armored vehicles, 6,500 SPGs, which are self-propelled howitzers, guns, 7,500 in towed, 3,300 in rocket projectors, and 3.2 million personnel in their active forces, and 300,000 in their paramilitary. China has 9,000 main battle tanks plus 3,000 in storage. And all the stuff China keeps in storage can easily be brought out and refurbished. I want you all to understand that. So really, I'm just going to include their storage numbers. I'm not even going to say they're in storage. I'm just going to include them in the actual main figure. So 35,000 plus 4,000 storage. Okay, they have 39,000. Okay, they got 12,000 main battle tanks, 39,000 infantry fighting vehicles and APCs. That's crazy huge. I mean, that's even bigger than Russia's by quite a bit. They have 4,300 self-propelled guns, including storage. They got 4,200 towed artillery. They got 3,160 rocket projectors, 4 million active duty, and 20 million paramilitary forces that are all combat grade. They can be used in combat. USA, we only have 6,330 main battle tanks, and we have 400 in storage that came from the Marine Corps that they put in storage. They could be brought out, but they're mothballed for now. They could be brought out and reused again, but we have, for right now, in active strength, we have 6,330 main battle tanks. Only 20,000 IFVs and APCs, armored vehicles, compared to China's almost 40,000. So we have like half of what China has, and we have 10,000 less than Russia. We only have 1,055 self-propelled guns, 1,700 towed artillery, and 1,300 rocket projectors, and only 2.4 million men. 2.4 million. China has a total of 24 million, and Russia, if you can include their 300,000 paramilitary with their 3.2 million, they got 3.5 million to our 2.4 million. Okay, now we look at air power. China has the biggest, most massive combat air force. They have 2,150 fighters and fighter bombers, 242 strategic bombers, which is 2,392 combat aircraft. Russia has 1,360 fighters and fighter bombers and 571 strategic, which is 1,931 total. And USA has only 1,640 fighters and fighter bombers and only 156 strategic, which is 1,796. So we have the smallest combat air fleet. So even starting out in a rapid war, we are at a massive disadvantage. We are a paper tiger. We're like France in 1940.